Thanks, John. Thanks. Well done. Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, I'm Robert Watson. Thanks for coming. First off, welcome to Lynn University, site of the third and final presidential debate this past October 22nd. And a quick note on some of those awards that I've won for civic education. The topic I'll be discussing today is not the topic I take to K through 12 schools, okay? So just a point of clarification. That's usually Black History Month or Women's History Month or President's Day. We're here to talk about my new book, Affairs of State. What I was trying to get at with the book was this. Rather than just tell stories about presidential misbehavior, the book's not just about the whodunit, who did it and who didn't do it, or with whom. I'm trying to find a new lens, if you will, a new way of studying presidential character. For example, about 12 years ago, I wrote a book on the First Ladies, and I thought that it would be important to understand the presidents from a different angle. That is, why not study the person that knew them the best? So, for example, what possibly could I, as an historian, contribute to the body of knowledge on Lincoln or George Washington? Pretty much everything that could be written about Lincoln or Washington probably has been written. The greatest historians have spent years poring through the letters and the evidence to produce this book on Lincoln or this book and the hundreds of books on Washington. So my thought was, eureka, why not look at the person that knew them the best, the First Lady? Because historians have largely ignored the role of the First Lady, as they've largely ignored the role of mistresses in shaping the man. Why? And I suspect because a lot of my colleagues tend to be older men, educated in a certain way that didn't study such matters. And most historians, as I always say, were not educated in matters of the heart or the hearth. So therefore they ignore that. It's on cannons, crowns, and kings is what folks focus on. So by studying the First Lady, for example, the first thing Thomas Jefferson did after spending 17 days cooped up in a loft outside of Philadelphia writing the Declaration of Independence, the first thing he did is he went shopping. He went shopping for Martha, his wife. He missed her. She was preggers. She had had a miscarriage. And he missed her, and he bought her some gloves. Then he begged off from serving for the rest of that summer so he could go home to Monticello to be with his wife. Every winter of the Revolutionary War, right there in camp beside George Washington, suffering through the freezing weather at Valley Forge, was Martha Washington with her white bonnet, right there in camp. So by studying the First Ladies, we get new insights, I think, on the presidents and new insights on other things. Apropos to my book, Washington's closest advisor was Alexander Hamilton. And one of the chapters in the book talks about Hamilton's history of womanizing. For example, Bill Clinton was not the first, and Bill Clinton was not the worst when it comes to misbehavior in high office. There's a long, long history of it. And Eliot Spitzer, Arnold Schwarzenegger, John Edwards, these guys, David Petraeus, had nothing on Alexander Hamilton. And what we find is if you read, for example, letters written by Martha Washington during those winter camps, she was tough. She was like a soldier. She didn't complain about the weather. She didn't complain about the harsh conditions, but she did complain about one thing. There was a tomcat one winter that was misbehaving with all the lady cats, and it was noisy, 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 and it kept her awake at night. So she nicknamed the tomcat Alexander Hamilton because of all the young girls that would come into camp. I also did a book a few years ago called Life in the White House, and it was about the presidents at ease. What do they eat? What hobbies do they have? What are their fears and hopes, and what are they like as fathers and husbands? How did their kids turn out? As another way of assessing presidential character, providing us with another lens. For example, we're all still trying to figure out Dick Nixon, right? But if, for example, I looked and I said, Nixon in his free time liked to bowl alone and sometimes wore a black suit to do it. I mean, that begins to explain things, right, everyone? Who does this, right? Who does this? I guess all books end up being trilogies, right, everyone? So here's the end. Here's the trilogy. So Affairs of State, I try to take a different perspective on our presidents. And, for example, we all know about George Washington. But we study Washington at Yorktown. What brilliance. We study Washington's courage and dashing crossing of the Delaware on Christmas night, which saved the Revolution. But who were George Washington's girlfriends when he was a kid? And you find that the teenage Washington, on more than one occasion, basically goes back home in tears because he was turned down and puts pen to paper and writes roses are red, violets are blue type of poems. He once wrote that Cupid's dart has been shot through my heart when yet another girl turned him down. So this is a different look at Washington. And during my degrees and during my doctoral study, my professors didn't tell me about Washington's teenage girlfriend. So it's kind of fun, and I think it provides us with an important lens, a new way of understanding the presidents. We all know that our country's leaders have oftentimes been shaped by the hand of a woman, often a mother, often a wife, but I'm here to tell you, sometimes that of a mistress as well. It's in the news today as we tape this program. General David Petraeus is still dominating the headlines with his alleged affair and his misbehavior. Related to the book, what my first thought was when this happened to Petraeus and when it came out was during World War II, General Eisenhower was having a long-term affair with an attractive young British driver named Kay Summersby. What general hires a young female model to be his aide, if you will, instead of a major or a captain or a medal winner? Now, imagine if Eisenhower's affair with Kay Summersby came out during World War II, and as happened to Petraeus, what if we got rid of Ike before D-Day? During the Great Depression, Franklin Roosevelt was having affairs. Franklin Roosevelt had two very long-term affairs. One with Missy Lehan, Marguerite, his personal aide and secretary and cook and dresser and undresser, apparently, too. What if we found out about FDR's misbehavior? And what if we threw FDR out of office or demanded his resignation as the economy was recovering? All the way back to the French and Indian War, a very young George Washington was writing very romantic letters to a woman who was not Mrs. Washington. Her name was Sally Carey Fairfax, a very attractive, older, sophisticated neighbor. What if Washington's letters had become public during the French and Indian War or the Revolutionary War, much as Petraeus' emails became public? And what if we got rid of George Washington? So neither is, Bill Clinton's not the first and not the worst. Petraeus is not the first and not the worst. Been there, done that, there's a long history of it. In fact, it pains me to say that even Abraham Lincoln visited a prostitute. I know, say it isn't so, right? But it happened. Now, the details on it are sketchy. There's not a lot of letters written about this, but here's what we can piece together. Lincoln's best friend was Joshua Speed. And Speed was perhaps as dashing and as handsome and as, I guess, quote-unquote, lucky with the ladies as Lincoln was allegedly homely and awkward and unlucky in romance. And Speed felt sorry for Lincoln. They always called one another by their last names, Speed, Lincoln. And Speed invited Lincoln to work at his general store for employment. And then Speed didn't have a place to stay, so Lincoln let Speed stay upstairs at the general store. And during their friendship, Speed was using the services of a professional woman. Okay? And you imagine Lincoln upstairs at with a pillow over his head trying to mind his own business as Speed is doing his business. And Lincoln basically says to Speed, I've got to have a woman, it's been too long. And here's what appears to have happened. Only Abraham Lincoln would do this. It appears that Lincoln asked Speed for a letter of introduction with a professional woman. And I don't mean agriculture as the oldest profession. There was an occupation that predated agriculture. What we've pieced together is Lincoln visited the prostitute, and he had maybe $3 with him, which was a lot of money. Not Eliot Spitzer money when you're visiting escorts, but a pretty fair amount of money. And the prostitute apparently charges Lincoln $5, which was an enormous amount of money at the time. So Lincoln says to her, ma'am, I have to tell you, I hear Honest Abe, right? He says, I can't afford it. I only have $3. Well, she knows Speed, so there's a possibility that he could pay her when he gets the money. He doesn't have the money. What we know is either A, because Lincoln got embarrassed, or B, his honor got the best of him. But when she said to Lincoln, you could either pay me later or maybe this one's on the house, Lincoln ran out the door. So they say when you visit a prostitute, there should always be a happy ending. This is not from personal experience, by the way. But in this case, it was not a happy ending. It was a good ending. So even Abraham Lincoln. So what I thought I'd do for my main body of my remarks today is tell you just a couple of my favorite stories, not just about mistresses in history,